familiar with my channel, you may have heard me name Rennie Perez a few times. He is an American director, writer. I reviewed quite a few of his movies before. I actually quite enjoy them. They do have their problems. They're not for everyone, but he's actually one of my favourite directors in the kind of the B-movie sphere. Whenever he does a movie, I kind of like to check it out. I kind of enjoy them on a guilty pleasure. This is just a new one, although it was filmed in 2021, or at least started to be filmed in 2021, but now out in 2025, and is a vampire movie. The story focuses on a woman who has terminal cancer, and she can't afford to pay her medical insurance and stuff, and is struggling to, you know, take care of her farm. Her boyfriend's cheating on her and such, and she's approached by another young woman who kind of looks like Wednesday Addams from obviously the Wednesday Netflix Addams Family TV show, who offers her an alternative, effectively saying that if she agrees to serve this mistress will provide this young woman with a drop of her blood that will cure her ailments and give her more vitality. And with it all sounding very kind of scientific, obviously what it basically means is this mistress is actually a vampire, and she is effectively offering this young woman to become like a semi-vampire, at least starting on that journey, in exchange for luring victims to this female vampire's hideout, where she is going to, you know, basically feed on people. At the same time, there is kind of like a rival, kind of more monstrous group of vampires that seems to be at odds with this mistress and her small cabal of kind of followers. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's talk about it. So let's get back to Rennie Perez. As I say, I do quite enjoy his movies. I have reviewed a few. His movies have a tendency to be somewhat samey, to be honest. Extended action sequences, often in the same locations. This one, although it has some kind of familiar elements to various Rennie Perez movies, it actually feels a little different. It is more plot driven than the majority of Rennie Perez movies that I have watched. It also doesn't seem to be taking place, for the most part, in the same locations, and it's a lot more dialogue driven than many of his films. So it was nice to see a film from him where it is a little bit more of a stretch in regards to just shootouts in the woods, which tend to be a lot of what is the content that Rennie Perez puts out. So I kind of like that, and it's an interesting idea here, the way this kind of female vampire is recruiting people by offering them a cure to whatever ailment they have, and she doesn't do it for many people. There's, including this new woman, there's two others. There's three in total. And the way that this kind of existing kind of acolyte explains it is all kind of quite scientific. How she needs a certain element from the blood, and you know, it helps when the victims are kind of scared because of the adrenal gland releases, like, you know, an endorphin and stuff, which is better for this kind of vampire to feed on, and things like this. So they try and kind of explain it in a scientific way, but still keeping supernatural elements in it. So I kind of quite like some of the kind of the mythology building here, and because it's more of a dialogue-driven movie than a lot of the previous Rennie Perez movies efforts that I've seen, you get a little bit more meat on the bones in regards to characters. For example, our main character, this woman, she's quite ill, and she meets this kind of, as I say, this acolyte that kind of approaches her, the one that looks like Wednesday Addams. And this Wednesday Addams has pretty much been pretty much sheltered from the majority of other humans and stuff, and she's very kind of like gullible and naive. And they have quite, it's kind of a sweet relationship where this Wednesday Addams sort of style character is desperate to kind of be friends with this new girl because she hasn't really had much of that in her life and things. So there was kind of a few elements here that I feel fleshed out the characters. Now some of the other things that they've done to flesh out the characters is kind of political, and we'll come on to that. But even in regards to that, at least these characters are relatively kind of well defined. Rennie Perez is quite a vocal political voice in his films, but again, fine. At least this character has some. You have an idea about her personality, as written by Rennie Perez. And then we have, let's say, an interesting kind of idea here, where as the film goes on, she agrees to be part of this kind of little vampire family, but then she has this kind of moral objection to this vampire basically killing innocent people, and she kind of like, well, I kind of object to this, but at the same time, if I don't do it, you're kind of like signing your own death warrant because she won't get this blood that she needs to survive. And then we have this other kind of like more monstrous sort of faction of vampires that look more like kind of Nosferatu and stuff. So it's interesting you have these different sorts of styles of vampires, which again adds a little bit more flavour. The end sequence takes place in a kind of like a haunt attraction, and there's fist fights, shootouts, and things like that. So it's not as action heavy as many Rennie Perez movies. In actual fact, there's really only kind of one action sequence in the end, although it is an extended one. But it is a bit more story based. It is a bit more character based, and has some ideas of kind of morality and choices that one makes and things like this. So I kind of enjoyed it for that. I was a little bit more sucked into the characters than most. Alright, so let's talk about what doesn't work in this movie. So Rennie Perez's directorial style is quite present in many of his films. A lot of his films have this kind of washed out look. It's true of this one, but I think it goes a little bit too far, where I feel the screen is just a little bit too washed out at times, making it almost looks like, the idea here is meant to have this sort of retro look, like a 70s look. But the movie doesn't take place in the 70s, it takes place in modern America, so it strikes me as like an odd choice. I understand the choice to do that if the movie is representative of the time that would take place, but it isn't. And as such, it kind of looks weird. And it looks distracting you, and it's often hard to see, particularly in dark scenes, where it is still kind of washed out. There's also the decision here to have like these grain effects, like digital grain effects, and kind of like errors on the screen and things like that, little kind of like blemishes on the film and all this. So I just don't think it really suited this film. If you're making a film set in the 70s, I get it. But it doesn't suit a movie made to take place in modern America. It just seems like a really odd choice. I think the movie may be a little slow for some, because there isn't much action, and it's not a particularly VFX heavy movie. Our kind of rival group of vampires are more monstrous, but we don't see a hell of a lot of them. It's not a particularly gory film. There's not like many victims in this. It is mostly a kind of a dialogue driven movie. And I have to be honest, I don't think the acting is fantastic, if I'm honest. I thought some of the ideas for the dialogue were actually okay. But the delivery is a little bit rough sometimes. So again, it loses a little bit of impetus in regards to that. And then obviously we have to talk about the political leanings in this. Now that's going to be great for some, not so good for other ones, because it is up and in quite in the forefront of this movie. Maybe not as much as some of Rennie Perez movies. This movie was made in 2021, or at least started production, obviously in the thralls of the coronavirus, and that plays a big part in this movie. There's a lot of talk of vaccine mandates and things like this, Now, because this is now 2025, I've got to say it's kind of aged out of that now, almost. It seems somewhat short-sighted. If you are releasing it in 2021, it's quite pertinent. But regardless of your view on that, and I try to be apolitical, I have my political opinions, but I don't really discuss them that much on the channel. But again, I think it dates the movie because really no one's talking about that so much now because we're it's past. But this movie very much brings it up multiple times. So, are you something that you feel strongly about? That's up to you. And also, as I say, it kind of puts this movie in a certain time frame where people talk about this a lot. And in 2025, when we're watching this, then it's kind of past. We're on to other things now. So there's that. So yeah, that might be down to at least the kind of the subject of that may well be down to your personal opinion. But I think the knock-on effect also is it kind of makes this movie, as I say, a little feel out of time in a way. Overall, I still was actually somewhat engrossed in the story of this one. As I said, there is more story here than a lot of Renny Perez movies. It does lack a little bit of action. I would have liked to have seen a bit more in the vampire stuff in this movie because I felt we get precious little. We don't really get many victims, and that was a bit of a missed opportunity to me. But it was an interesting movie. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.